The gunshot that killed Victoria Rosewood's husband echoed through her nightmares for 3 years before she finally stopped flinching at the sound of thunder. She stood in the doorway of the general store in Seligman, Arizona, her fingers gripping the frame as her eyes swept the dusty street outside, cataloging every alley, every gap between buildings, every possible route of escape. It was 1883, and the habit of mapping exits had kept her alive longer than love ever had. The store owner, Mrs. Callahan, watched her with sympathetic eyes that Victoria pretended not to notice. She had come to this remote Arizona town precisely because nobody knew her story here, and she intended to keep it that way. The desert heat pressed against her back as she finally stepped inside, the bell above the door chiming softly. Her shoulders relaxed slightly when she realized the store had 3 exits: the front door, a back entrance she could see through the storage area, and a side door near the grain barrels. "Help you find something, dear?" Mrs. Callahan asked, her voice gentle. "Just looking," Victoria replied, keeping her voice steady and polite. She moved through the aisles with purpose, never letting her back face the main entrance for long, always positioning herself where she could see who came and went. She needed supplies for the small boarding house she had purchased on the edge of town, the one with windows in every room and doors that opened outward. The bell chimed again, and Victoria's hand froze over a bag of flour. She did not turn immediately, but her peripheral vision caught the silhouette of a tall man, broad-shouldered, wearing a dusty trail coat and a hat that shadowed his face. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to breathe slowly to appear calm. The man's spurs clinked softly as he walked, and she tracked his movement by sound alone. "Morning, Mr. Quinn," Mrs. Callahan greeted warmly. "What brings you to town?" "Need some supplies for the ranch?" a deep voice responded. "And maybe some of that coffee you keep in the back." Victoria risked a glance. The man had moved to the counter, his back to her, giving her a clear view of the front door. She noticed this immediately and felt some of the tension leave her spine. He was not blocking her exit. She studied him more carefully now, taking in the way he stood with an easy confidence that spoke of a man comfortable in his own skin. His dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, and when he removed his hat to run a hand through it, she saw a strong profile with a straight nose and a jaw that looked like it could take a punch. "How is your father doing?" Mrs. Callahan asked as she gathered items for him. "Better. The fever broke last week. He is still weak, but the doctor says he will recover fully with rest." The man's voice carried genuine relief, and Victoria found herself listening despite her intention to remain detached. "I have been running the ranch mostly on my own for the past month, so I apologize for not coming to town more often." "You are doing a fine job, Kieran. Your father would be proud." Kieran Quinn. Victoria filed the name away without knowing why it mattered. She selected her flour, sugar, and a few other necessities, then approached the counter with careful steps. The cowboy noticed her approach and immediately shifted to his left, creating a wide berth between himself and the doorway. The movement seemed unconscious, natural, as if he always made space for others without thinking about it. "Madam," he said, tipping his head politely. His eyes met hers for just a moment, and she saw they were a striking shade of gray-green like sage in the rain. Then he looked away, respecting her space and her privacy in a way that felt both foreign and welcome. Victoria murmured her thanks and placed her items on the counter. Mrs. Callahan tallied the cost while Kieran examined a display of rope near the window, once again positioning himself away from any exit Victoria might need. She told herself she was being paranoid, that he was just a polite rancher who happened to have good manners, but something about his deliberate movements suggested a deeper awareness. As she paid for her goods, Kieran returned to the counter with his selections. "Let me help you carry those to wherever you are headed," he offered, nodding at her heavy bags. "I can manage," Victoria said quickly, perhaps too quickly. She saw something flicker in his eyes, not offense, but understanding, and he nodded. "Of course, but if you change your mind, I will be loading my wagon out front for the next few minutes." He touched his hat brim again and gathered his own purchases. Victoria watched him leave, watched how he held the door open without standing in it, how he moved to the far side of the boardwalk to give her plenty of space if she wanted to exit behind him. She felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest, something that felt dangerously like curiosity. "That is Kieran Quinn," Mrs. Callahan said softly. "He runs the Triple Q Ranch about 5 miles north of town. Good man. Honorable. His father, Thomas, has owned that land for 20 years. Kieran came back from driving cattle up to Dodge City about 4 years ago and has been helping run the place ever since. He is 26, unmarried, and before you hear it from the gossips, I will tell you plain that half the unmarried women in town have tried to catch his eye." "I am not looking," Victoria said firmly. "No one said you were, dear. But a woman alone needs to know who the good men are and who to avoid. Kieran is one of the good ones." "Mrs." Callahan's expression turned serious. "And I can see you have been hurt. I will not pry. But I want you to know that Seligman is a safe town. We look after our own here." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes unexpectedly and blinked them away. "Thank you," she managed. She collected her bags and walked to the door, pausing to scan the street before stepping out. Kieran was loading his wagon on the far side of the street, well away from her path. He glanced up, caught her eye, and simply nodded before returning to his work. No staring, no following, no attempt to close the distance between them. She walked back to her boarding house with quick steps, her mind replaying the encounter despite her best efforts to dismiss it. The house was a 2-story structure with faded blue paint and a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. It had cost most of her savings, but it was hers, and it had windows that let her see anyone approaching from any direction. She had 6 rooms to rent, though currently they were all empty. She had only been in Seligman for 2 weeks, and word was still spreading that the boarding house was open for business. Victoria spent the rest of the day cleaning and organizing, throwing herself into physical work until her arms ached and her mind grew quiet. But that night, lying in her bed with the windows open to catch the desert breeze, she found herself thinking about gray-green eyes and the way a man had moved to give her space without being asked. The next Sunday she attended church for the first time since arriving in town. She chose a seat in the back pew near the side door and spent the first few minutes of the service confirming that she could leave quickly if needed. The congregation was small, maybe 40 people, and she felt their curious gazes on her throughout the hymns and prayers. The pastor, a kindly man named Reverend Morris, welcomed her warmly after the service and introduced her to several families. Kieran Quinn was there with his father, a silver-haired man with kind eyes and a frail build that spoke of recent illness. When the introductions reached them, Kieran shook her hand with a firm but brief grip and then stepped back, creating space. His father, Thomas, was more effusive in his welcome. "Always good to see new faces in Seligman," Thomas said. "My son tells me you have opened the boarding house on Cedar Street. That is wonderful news. We have needed a proper place for travelers to stay. The hotel burned down 3 years ago and never was rebuilt." "Thank you," Victoria said. "I hope to serve the community well." "If you need anything at all, you send word to the Triple Q," Thomas continued. "We believe in helping our neighbors." Kieran met her eyes briefly, and she saw a question there, an offer of assistance with no pressure attached. She nodded her understanding, and he seemed satisfied with that, turning his attention to helping his father navigate through the crowd. She noticed how patient Kieran was with Thomas, how he matched his pace to his father's slower steps, how he listened attentively when the older man spoke. Over the following weeks, Victoria established a routine in Seligman. She opened her boarding house officially and soon had 2 permanent residents, a school teacher named Miss Harriet Chen, who taught the town's children, and a retired miner named William Burke, who spent his days whittling on the front porch and telling stories to anyone who would listen. Both were quiet, respectful tenants who paid on time and did not ask invasive questions about her past. She saw Kieran Quinn in town occasionally. He always acknowledged her with a polite nod, but never approached unless she initiated conversation. When they did speak, usually in passing at the general store or the post office, he was courteous and brief, never lingering, never cornering her in conversation. She noticed things about him despite herself, The way he helped elderly Mrs. Patterson carry her groceries without being asked, how he broke up a fight between two drunk cowboys outside the saloon using calm words instead of fists, how he always paid his bills in full and on time. One afternoon in late October, Victoria was in the mercantile examining fabric for new curtains when a commotion outside drew everyone's attention. Through the window, she saw a wagon careening down the main street, the horses spooked and running wild. People scattered, shouting warnings. A small boy no more than 6 years old stood frozen in the middle of the street, directly in the wagon's path. Kieran Quinn appeared from somewhere to her left, running full speed. He swept the boy up in one arm and dove to the side just as the wagon thundered past, missing them by inches. The horses continued down the street until several men managed to grab the reins and bring them under control. Kieran sat in the dust, the crying child clutched safely against his chest, and Victoria saw his hands shaking slightly with the aftershock of adrenaline. She found herself moving toward him without conscious decision, pushing through the crowd that had gathered. Kieran was standing now, passing the boy to his mother, who was sobbing with relief and gratitude. His coat was torn, and blood seeped from a scrape on his forearm where he had hit the ground. "You are hurt," Victoria said, her voice sharper than she intended. Concern had overridden caution. He looked at her in surprise. "Just a scratch. I have had worse from ornery cattle." "It needs cleaning," she insisted. "Come to the boarding house. I have medical supplies." "Mrs. Rosewood, that is not necessary." "It was not a request, Mr. Quinn." She was already walking, trusting he would follow. After a moment, she heard his spurs jingling behind her. Her heart pounded, and she felt slightly dizzy with her own boldness. She had just invited a man she barely knew into her home, had demanded he follow her, and yet every instinct that usually screamed danger remained silent. At the boarding house, she led him to the kitchen and pointed to a chair. He sat obediently while she gathered clean water cloth and the medical kit she kept well stocked out of long habit. Her hands were steady as she rolled up his sleeve and examined the wound. It was deeper than she had thought, filled with dirt and gravel. "This will hurt," she warned. "I can take it," he said quietly. She cleaned the wound with careful efficiency, aware of his eyes on her face but not uncomfortable with it. His breathing remained steady even when she had to probe for embedded dirt. When she finally bandaged the arm, she sat back and met his gaze directly for the first time. "Thank you," she said. "What you did for that child was brave." "Just did what anyone would do." "No," she said firmly. "Most people would have frozen. You did not hesitate." Kieran was quiet for a moment. "I grew up with a younger sister," he said finally. "She died of scarlet fever when she was 8. I was 15. I guess ever since then I cannot stand by when a child is in danger." The raw honesty in his voice cut through her carefully constructed walls. "I am sorry for your loss." "It was a long time ago?" He studied his bandaged arm. "You have good hands for this kind of work. Steady." "I have had practice." The words slipped out before she could stop them. His eyes sharpened with understanding, but he did not pry. "Well, I appreciate your help, Mrs. Rosewood." He stood, moving slowly, telegraphing his movements. "I should get back to the ranch. My father will wonder where I've been." She walked him to the door, and as he stepped onto the porch, he turned back. "If you ever need anything at all, the Triple Q is not far. You have a horse?" "No," she admitted. "Might be worth getting one," he said carefully. "Not because of danger, just practical for getting around. If you want, I could bring a gentle mare to town sometime, let you see if you're interested. No obligation." Victoria considered this. A horse meant mobility, meant another escape route if she ever needed it. "That would be acceptable," she said. "Next week, then, if that suits you. Sunday after church?" "Yes." He touched his hat and left, and she watched him walk down the street, watched how he gave wide berth to a woman sweeping her porch, how he stepped aside to let children run past. a man who understood space, who understood fear without needing explanations. She closed the door and leaned against it, her heart beating faster than it should. The following Sunday, Kieran arrived with a beautiful chestnut mare with a white blaze down her face. The horse had gentle eyes and a calm demeanor, standing patiently while Victoria approached. "This is Rosie," Kieran said. "She is about 8 years old, well-trained, and has the sweetest temperament of any horse I have ever known. She was my sister's horse originally. My father has kept her all these years, but she needs someone to ride her regularly." Victoria reached out slowly, letting Rosie sniff her hand before stroking the soft nose. The mare nickered softly, and Victoria felt something loosen in her chest. "She is beautiful. Want to try riding her? I can walk alongside." They spent the next hour with Victoria relearning how to ride. It had been years since she had been on a horse, and she was rusty, but Kieran was a patient teacher. He showed her how to mount, how to hold the reins, how to guide Rosie with gentle pressure. True to his word, he walked beside them, never crowding, always giving her space to figure things out herself. "You are a natural," he said, when she managed to trot Rosie in a circle around the yard behind the boarding house. "Give it another week or two, and you will be riding like you were born to it." "I would like to buy her," Victoria said impulsively, "if your father is willing to sell." Kieran's face lit up with a genuine smile, the first she had seen from him. It transformed his features, making him look younger and impossibly handsome. "He would be thrilled to see Rosie with someone who will appreciate her. We can work out a fair price." They settled on an amount that Victoria suspected was well below the mare's actual value, but when she tried to argue, Kieran was firm. "Rosie deserves a good home. The money is secondary." As fall turned to winter, Victoria and Kieran developed an easy friendship. He came to town once or twice a week for supplies or to check on his father's health with the doctor, and he always stopped by the boarding house to see how she was managing. She found herself looking forward to these visits, found herself lingering by the window on days when she thought he might come. They talked about practical things mostly, the weather, town gossip, how her boarding house was doing, how the ranch was faring, but gradually, deeper subjects emerged. He told her about his dreams of expanding the Triple Q, of breeding better cattle, of building a legacy his father could be proud of. She told him about her love of cooking, how she found peace in creating meals that nourished people, how she hoped to make the boarding house a true home for travelers passing through. She never told him about her husband's death, but she suspected he knew something terrible had happened. He never asked, never pushed, and she was grateful for his restraint. What mattered was the present, the way he made her feel safe without making her feel trapped, the way he respected her boundaries while making it clear he was interested in knowing her better. Christmas approached, and the town prepared for celebrations. Victoria threw herself into decorating the boarding house, making it festive for her tenants. Miss Chen helped her string popcorn garlands, and Mr. Burke carved small wooden ornaments. On Christmas Eve, there was a dance at the church hall, and Victoria surprised herself by attending. She wore her best dress, a deep blue that brought out the color in her eyes, and she felt nervous in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Kieran was there with his father, both dressed in clean shirts and string ties. When he saw her, his eyes widened slightly, and she saw appreciation there, clear and honest. He approached carefully, as always, stopping a respectful distance away. "You look beautiful, Mrs. Rosewood," he said quietly. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn. You clean up well yourself. Would you do me the honor of dancing with me? And would you consider calling me Kieran? I feel like we have moved beyond formalities." She hesitated only a moment. "Only if you call me Victoria." His smile was slow and warm. "Victoria, that is a lovely name." He offered his hand, and she took it, letting him lead her to the dance floor. The music started, a slow waltz, and he placed one hand lightly on her waist, holding her other hand in his. The position was proper, respectful, but she was intensely aware of every point of contact between them. He was a good dancer, confident but not showy, and he guided her through the steps with ease. I did not know cowboys could waltz, she teased gently. My mother insisted I learn before she passed, he said. She said a man should be able to move in a ballroom as well as he does in a saddle. I grumbled about it as a boy, but I'm grateful now. They danced 3 more dances that evening, and each time he asked permission first, and each time she said yes. Between dances, he made sure she had refreshments and introduced her to more people, but he never monopolized her time. When other men asked her to dance, he stepped aside graciously, though she saw something dark flicker in his eyes that might have been jealousy. The winter passed with surprising speed. Victoria's boarding house thrived, and she took on 2 more tenants, a young married couple who were homesteading nearby and needed a place to stay while their house was being built. Kieran visited regularly, and their conversations grew longer, more personal. She learned about his childhood, his years driving cattle, his love for the land. He learned about her passion for gardening, her skill with numbers, her dry sense of humor that sometimes caught him off guard and made him laugh. In early March, a storm rolled through Seligman, bringing torrential rains that turned the streets to mud and kept everyone indoors. On the second day of the storm, Victoria heard frantic knocking at her door. She opened it to find a young Mexican woman, heavily pregnant and soaked to the bone, her eyes wide with fear and pain. "Please," the woman gasped in accented English, "baby coming, need help." Victoria did not hesitate. She pulled the woman inside and called for Miss Chen, who had some experience with childbirth. They got the woman upstairs to an empty room and made her as comfortable as possible. The labor was difficult and lasted through the night. Victoria stayed by the woman's side, holding her hand, wiping her brow, offering words of encouragement. When dawn broke, a healthy baby boy entered the world, wailing lustily. The mother, whose name was Elena, wept with relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much. I was traveling to meet my husband in Prescott. The wagon broke down outside town. I had nowhere to go." "You and your baby are welcome to stay here as long as you need," Victoria said firmly. "No charge until you're back on your feet." Word spread quickly through town about Victoria's kindness. When Kieran heard, he rode through the mud to check on her. She answered the door exhausted, her hair falling from its pins, her dress stained, but her eyes were bright. "I heard what you did," he said softly. "That was an extraordinary thing." "It was what anyone would do," she said, echoing his words from months ago. "No," he said just as firmly as she had then. "Most people would have turned her away. You opened your home without hesitation." He paused, then added quietly, "You have the biggest heart of anyone I have ever met, Victoria." She felt tears spring to her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. "I should get back inside." "Wait." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. "I brought this for you. For the baby, too, some things from the ranch that might help." She opened the bundle to find a soft blanket, baby clothes that must have been from his sister, and a carved wooden rattle. The thoughtfulness of it overwhelmed her. "Kieran, this is too much. It is sitting in a trunk at the ranch doing no good for anyone. I think my mother would have been happy to see it used for a baby in need." His eyes met hers. "I think she would have liked you very much." Victoria felt something shift inside her, some final wall beginning to crumble. "Would you like to meet them? Elena and the baby?" "I would be honored." She led him upstairs, and he was gentle and respectful with Elena, congratulating her in fluent Spanish that surprised Victoria. He held the baby with surprising ease, his large hands cradling the tiny head with practiced care. "You are good with babies," Victoria observed. "Helped with births on the ranch since I was a boy," he said. "Calves, foals, even puppies. Babies are not so different, just a bit more fragile." After he left, Elena looked at Victoria with knowing eyes. "That man loves you," she said simply. "We are just friends," Victoria protested weakly. "Friendly men do not look at women the way he looks at you. And women who are just friends do not watch men leave with such longing." Elena shifted the baby to her other arm. "Whatever you are running from, it is not here. Maybe it is time to stop running." Victoria thought about those words for days. She realized that for the first time in 3 years, she had gone an entire week without checking exits obsessively, without jolting awake from nightmares, without feeling the constant weight of fear on her shoulders. Seligman felt like home. The boarding house felt like her sanctuary, not her fortress, and Kieran Quinn felt like something she had thought she would never have again. Possibility. Spring arrived in a riot of wildflowers and warm breezes. Elena's husband came for her and the baby, and they left with tears and promises to write. Victoria threw herself into planting a garden behind the boarding house, turning the dry soil and coaxing vegetables and herbs to life. Kieran helped, showing up one Saturday morning with seedlings from the ranch. "My mother's garden," he explained. "Been maintaining it, but I cannot use all these plants. Thought you might want them." They worked side by side in comfortable silence, and Victoria felt something bloom in her chest that had nothing to do with the plants. When they finished, they sat on the back porch with lemonade, dusty and tired and happy. "Victoria," Kieran said carefully, "I want to say something, and I need you to know there's no pressure behind it. You can say no, and nothing between us will change. I will still be your friend, still come by, still respect your space." Her heart began to race. "All right. I have feelings for you, deep feelings that go well beyond friendship." His gray-green eyes held hers steadily. "I think I started falling for you that first day in the general store, when you cataloged every exit like a cavalry scout planning retreat routes. I fell harder when you demanded to tend my arm after the runaway wagon, and I fell completely when I saw you help Elena without a second thought." He took a breath, his voice remaining calm and earnest. "I know you have been hurt. I do not know the details, and you do not have to tell me unless you want to. But I need you to know that I see you, Victoria. I see how brave you are, how strong, how kind. I see how you position yourself to always have an escape route, and I want to be the kind of man you never feel you need to escape from." Tears were streaming down Victoria's face now, but they were not tears of fear. "You already are that man," she whispered. "I have noticed, Kieran. Every single time you moved to give me space, every time you stepped away from a doorway, every time you made sure I felt safe. I thought I was paranoid, seeing things that were not there, but you were doing it deliberately." "I was," he admitted. "My mother, before she died, she had a friend who lived in fear of her husband. I was young, but I remember how she would flinch at sudden movements, how she always sat where she could see the door. My mother taught me to be aware, to give people space, to never make anyone feel cornered." His voice roughened. "When I saw you doing the same thing, I understood, and I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to know you, I would make sure you always felt safe with me." Victoria reached out and took his hand, a gesture that felt monumental. "My husband was not a good man," she said slowly, the words painful but necessary. "He was violent when he drank, and he drank often. I tried to leave twice. He found me both times. The third time, he came home drunk and angry, and he had a gun. I thought he was going to kill me, but one of our neighbors heard the shouting and came with the sheriff. There was a struggle. The gun went off." She closed her eyes briefly. "He died. The law ruled it self-defense by the neighbor, and I was free to go. But I have spent 3 years looking over my shoulder, waiting for his ghost to catch up with me." Kieran squeezed her hand gently. "I am so sorry you went through that. No one deserves to live in fear like that." "I thought I would never trust a man again," she continued. "I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone, and I was fine with that. But then I met you, and you were different from the start. You gave me space to breathe, room to choose. You never pushed, never demanded, never made me feel trapped. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being afraid around you. I stopped checking exits when we were together. Do you know how miraculous that feels?" "Victoria." Her name on his lips was a prayer. "Can I court you properly? Can I take you to dinner? Bring you flowers, sit on your porch in the evening and talk about our days? Can I show you that love does not have to hurt? That it can be gentle and patient and kind?" "Yes," she said, smiling through her tears. "Yes to all of it." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles softly. "I will never block an exit for you. I will never make you feel caged, and I will spend every day proving that you can trust me with your heart." Their courtship was everything he promised. Kieran took her to dinner at the small restaurant in town, where he made sure they sat at a table with a clear view of the door. He brought her flowers from the meadows near his ranch, bouquets of wildflowers that she arranged in mason jars throughout the boarding house. He sat on her porch on warm evenings, and they talked for hours about everything and nothing. He introduced her to his father properly, and Thomas welcomed her with open arms, clearly delighted that his son had found someone special. Victoria met the ranch hands who worked for the Quinns, good men who treated her with respect and told her stories about Kieran's skill with horses and his fairness as a boss. She saw where Kieran lived, a comfortable ranch house with a wide porch and rooms that overlooked the rolling hills. She met his cattle, his horses, his dogs. She saw his life laid out before her, honest and open, with no shadows lurking in corners. In June, they went on a picnic to a beautiful spot by a creek that ran through Quinland. The water burbled over smooth stones, and cottonwood trees provided shade from the hot sun. They ate chicken sandwiches and strawberries, and they talked about their hopes for the future. "I want to expand the ranch," Kieran said, lying back on the blanket with his hat over his eyes. "Not just bigger, but better. I want to breed quality cattle, horses that people come from all over Arizona to buy. I want to build something that lasts, something that matters." "You will," Victoria said with certainty. "You have the skill and the determination." "What about you? What do you want for your future?" She was quiet for a moment, considering. "I want the boarding house to be a place where people feel safe. A haven for travelers, for people who need a soft place to land. I want to expand the garden, maybe sell vegetables at the market. I want to build a life that is mine, on my own terms." She paused. "And I want to share it with someone who understands that independence is not the same as isolation." He lifted his hat and looked at her. "That sounds like a beautiful life." "It does, doesn't it?" She smiled at him. "Somewhere along the way, I stopped just surviving and started actually living again. You helped me do that." "You did the hard part yourself," he said. "I just made sure to stay out of your way." She laughed and leaned over to kiss him, a soft press of lips that was still new and exciting. He cupped her face gently, his calloused hand rough against her cheek but his touch feather light. When they pulled apart, his eyes were dark with emotion. "I love you, Victoria Rosewood," he said quietly. "I am completely, utterly in love with you." "I love you too, Kieran Quinn," she replied, "more than I thought I could ever love anyone again." In August, on a Sunday after church, Kieran asked her father in front of the entire congregation if he could marry Victoria. Thomas gave his enthusiastic blessing, and Kieran got down on one knee right there in the churchyard and produced a ring that had belonged to his mother. "Victoria, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making sure you feel safe and loved and cherished? Will you build a future with me side by side as equal partners?" "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely, yes." The wedding was in October, exactly 1 year after Kieran had saved the boy from the runaway wagon. The whole town turned out for the celebration. Victoria wore a cream-colored dress with lace sleeves, and Kieran wore his best suit with a bolo tie. Reverend Morris performed the ceremony in the church, and when he pronounced them husband and wife, Kieran kissed her with such tenderness that she felt it in her bones. The reception was held at the boarding house with tables set up in the yard and food provided by half the town. Miss Chen cried happy tears, and Mr. Burke gave a rambling toast about second chances and the beauty of love. Thomas pulled Victoria aside and hugged her tightly. "My son is a good man, but you have made him better," Thomas said. "You have made him happier than I have seen him since before his mother died. Thank you for that." "He saved me," Victoria said simply. "In every way a person can be saved." As the sun set and lanterns were lit, Kieran and Victoria danced under the stars. His hand was warm on her waist, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling utterly at peace. "Are you happy?" he murmured into her hair. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she answered honestly. They spent their wedding night in the ranch house, which Kieran had spent weeks preparing for her arrival. He had painted the bedroom her favorite shade of blue, had installed extra windows to let in light, had made sure every room had multiple exits because he knew it would make her feel secure. The gesture moved her to tears. "This is your home now," he said. "Our home. You can change anything you want, rearrange everything, make it completely yours. I want you to feel like you belong here." "I already do," she said, pulling him close. "I belong wherever you are." Their marriage was everything her first one was not. Kieran was patient and kind, treating her with respect and gentleness. He never raised his voice in anger, never drank to excess, never made her feel small or afraid. When they disagreed, which was rarely, they talked through it calmly until they reached a resolution. He encouraged her to keep running the boarding house if that was what she wanted, and she decided to keep it, hiring Miss Chen to manage it day to day while Victoria oversaw operations. Victoria threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm. She expanded the kitchen garden into a full operation, growing vegetables that she sold at market and preserved for winter. She learned to help with the horses, discovering she had a gift for gentling the more skittish animals. She became friends with the ranch hands and their families, hosting dinners and gatherings that made the Triple Q feel like a community. Thomas's health improved with Victoria around. She cooked him nutritious meals and made sure he took his medicine, and he repaid her by teaching her everything he knew about ranching. He called her the daughter he never had, and the affection between them was genuine and deep. In the spring of 1885, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. She told Kieran one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He whooped with joy, picked her up, and spun her around gently, then immediately set her down with concern. "Did I hurt you? Should you be spinning? Maybe you should sit down." She laughed at his sudden nervousness. "I am fine, Kieran. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am not fragile." "You are carrying our child," he said with wonder. "How can I not treat you like you are the most precious thing in the world?" "You already did that before I was pregnant," she pointed out. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Victoria felt healthy and strong, her body adapting to the changes with surprising ease. Kieran was attentive without being overbearing, helping with tasks that became difficult as she grew larger, but never treating her like she was incapable. He built a beautiful cradle from oak wood, carving their initials into the headboard along with the year. He painted the nursery a soft yellow and installed a rocking chair by the window. In November, Victoria went into labor on a crisp autumn day. Kieran rode for the doctor while Thomas stayed with her, calm and reassuring. The labor was long but not complicated, and just after midnight, a baby boy was born. He had Kieran's dark hair and Victoria's blue eyes, and he wailed with impressive lung power. When Kieran held his son for the first time, Victoria saw tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," Kieran whispered. "Absolutely perfect. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you for this incredible gift." They named him Thomas Kieran Quinn, after his grandfather and father, and called him Tommy. Thomas Sr. was beside himself with joy, declaring it the best day of his life since his own son was born. The ranch hands threw a party to celebrate, and gifts poured in from the town. Victoria's boarding house tenants sent a handmade quilt, and even strangers dropped by with casseroles and congratulations. Tommy was a happy baby, quick to smile, and easy to soothe. Kieran was a devoted father, getting up for nighttime feedings, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours just staring at his son with wonder. Victoria watched them together and felt her heart expand with love she had not known was possible. 2 years later, a daughter arrived. They named her Eleanor Rose Quinn, after Kieran's mother, and the gentle mare that had been Victoria's first step back into the world. Ella, as they called her, had her father's gray-green eyes and her mother's delicate features. She was more serious than her brother, watching the world with solemn attention before breaking into smiles that lit up the room. Life at the Triple Q fell into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch prospered under Kieran's management, and he became known throughout Arizona for his quality cattle and well-trained horses. Victoria's gardens became legendary, and she started teaching other women in the area her techniques. The boarding house continued to thrive under Miss Chen's management, and it became known as the finest place to stay in Seligman. Thomas Quinn Sr. passed peacefully in his sleep in 1889, surrounded by his family. He died happy, having seen his son settled with a wonderful wife and having known his 2 beautiful grandchildren. They buried him on the ranch under a cottonwood tree, and Victoria planted roses around the grave that bloomed every spring. More children came. A third son named Robert, after Victoria's father, arrived in 1890. Twin girls Sarah and Hannah were born in 1893, completing their family at 6 children. The ranch house expanded to accommodate them all, and chaos reigned in the best possible way. There were always children underfoot, animals to tend, meals to cook, lessons to teach. It was exhausting and wonderful, and exactly the life Victoria had dreamed of without daring to believe she could have it. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kieran and Victoria took a rare evening alone, leaving the children with a trusted ranch hand and his wife. They rode to the creek where he had told her he loved her all those years ago. The cottonwoods had grown taller, the creek ran just as clear, and the stars overhead were brilliant in the desert sky. "Do you remember when I asked you what you wanted for your future?" Kieran asked, pulling her close. "I remember," she said. "I wanted a life that was mine, on my own terms, shared with someone who understood that independence was not isolation." "Did you get what you wanted?" She looked at him, at the face she had come to know better than her own, at the eyes that had never once looked at her with anything but love and respect. "I got so much more than I wanted. I got everything I never dared to dream of." "I need you to know something," he said seriously. "In all these years, in all the rooms of all the houses we have been in together, I have never once blocked an exit for you. I never will. You need to know you always have a choice, always have freedom, always have the power to leave if you want to." Victoria felt tears spring to her eyes. "I know that, Kieran. I have always known. That is why I have never wanted to leave. You gave me the freedom to choose, and I choose you. Every single day, I choose you." "I choose you too," he said, kissing her softly. "Every day for the rest of my life." They stood there under the stars, wrapped in each other's arms, 2 people who had found healing and home in one another. Victoria realized she had not thought about exits or escape routes in years. She had not had nightmares about her first husband in longer than she could remember. The past was truly past, and the future stretched bright and beautiful before her. The years continued to pass in a blur of joy and work and love. Tommy grew into a fine young man who shared his father's gift with horses. Ella became a talented artist, filling the ranch house with sketches and paintings. Robert developed a head for numbers and took over the ranch's bookkeeping. The twins were inseparable, causing mischief and laughter wherever they went. Kieran's hair started to silver at the temples, and Victoria found reading glasses became necessary for her sewing. They grew older together, their love deepening and maturing with time. They still danced in the kitchen when the mood struck, still took rides together on Sunday afternoons, still talked for hours on the porch swing they had installed on the front porch. In 1905, Tommy married a lovely young woman named Alice, and they had their first child the following year. Victoria became a grandmother, a role she embraced with joy. She taught her granddaughter to garden just as she had taught her own children, and she delighted in watching Kieran with the baby. his gentleness with the tiny child unchanged from when their own babies were small. The boarding house eventually was sold to Miss Chen, who had managed it faithfully for over 20 years. Victoria was ready to pass it on, knowing it was in good hands. The money from the sale went into a trust for the grandchildren's education, something Victoria felt strongly about. She had learned the value of independence, and she wanted to make sure the next generation had opportunities. On a warm evening in 1910, Victoria and Kieran sat on their porch, watching the sun set over land they had built a life on. They were both in their 50s now, their children grown, their grandchildren thriving, their legacy secure. Kieran held her hand, his thumb tracing absent patterns on her skin. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. Victoria thought about the question seriously. She thought about the scared woman who had arrived in Seligman 27 years ago, cataloging exits and jumping at shadows. She thought about the journey from fear to trust, from survival to thriving, from loneliness to love. "Not a single one," she said firmly. "Everything I went through led me here, to you, to this life. I would not change a moment of it." "Even the hard parts?" "Especially the hard parts. They taught me what I needed to learn to be able to accept what you offered. If I had not known darkness, I might not have recognized the light when I found it." Kieran lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it, just as he had on the day she agreed to let him court her. "You are the strongest, bravest, most remarkable woman I have ever known. Loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life." "Loving you has been the safest I have ever felt," she replied. "You kept your promise, Kieran. You never blocked a single exit. You gave me space to heal, room to grow, freedom to choose, and I chose you over and over again." "And I chose you," he said. "Best decision I ever made." They sat together as the stars emerged, one by one, in the darkening sky. The sounds of the ranch drifted to them, cattle lowing in the distance, horses nickering in the barn, the wind rustling through the cottonwood trees. Inside the house, they could hear Ella playing the piano while Robert's children sang along. Tommy and his family would arrive tomorrow for Sunday dinner, a tradition that had continued through the years. Victoria leaned her head on Kieran's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his body, the security of his presence. She thought about the woman she had been and the woman she had become, and she felt profound gratitude for the journey between them. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible, for giving me space when I needed distance, for being patient when I was scared, for loving me even when I could not love myself, for building a life where I never have to be afraid again." "Victoria." He turned to face her, his eyes serious. "You did that yourself. I just made sure not to get in your way. Your courage, your strength, your capacity for love despite everything you endured, that was all you. I have been honored to witness it, to be part of your story, but the hero of this tale has always been you." She kissed him then, a kiss that held 27 years of love, trust, and partnership, a kiss that promised many more years to come. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. The years that followed were gentle ones. They watched their children build their own families, welcomed more grandchildren, and eventually even great-grandchildren. The Triple Q Ranch continued to prosper, a testament to hard work and wise management. They remained active and involved, but gradually they passed more responsibility to the younger generation, trusting them to carry on what had been built. Kieran's health remained strong well into his 70s, though he moved a bit slower and needed an afternoon rest most days. Victoria developed arthritis in her hands but refused to let it stop her from her gardens, simply adapting her techniques to work around the pain. They grew old together with grace and humor, still partners in every sense of the word. On a spring morning in 1925, they celebrated their 43rd wedding anniversary with a party at the ranch. All their children were there, along with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, plus friends from town and ranch hands past and present. It was a joyful chaos of food and music and love, exactly the kind of celebration they both enjoyed. As evening fell and guests began to depart, Tommy approached his parents with a large wrapped package. "This is from all of us. He was suri gang," he said. "Open it together." Victoria and Kieran unwrapped the package carefully, revealing a large painting. It showed the ranch house as it looked now, surrounded by gardens and outbuildings with mountains in the distance and a brilliant sunset sky. But the remarkable thing was the bottom corner, where Ella had painted two figures, a younger Victoria and Kieran standing side by side, looking out at the ranch they would build, the past and present merged in one beautiful image. "It is perfect," Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. "Absolutely perfect." That night, lying in bed with Kieran's arms around her as they had been for over 4 decades, Victoria reflected on the improbable miracle of her life. She had come to Seligman broken and terrified, expecting nothing but solitude and survival. Instead, she had found community, purpose, and a love so deep and true it had healed wounds she thought were permanent. "Are you still awake?" Kieran murmured in the darkness. "Yes," she said, "just thinking." "About what?" "About exits," she said, "and how I spent so many years looking for ways to escape only to discover that the truest freedom was in choosing to stay." She felt him smile against her hair. "I love you, Victoria Quinn." "I love you too, Kieran Quinn. Thank you for a lifetime of never standing in my way, even when you were exactly what I needed to run toward." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other and in memories of a life well lived. Outside, the Arizona desert slept under a blanket of stars, and the ranch they had built together stood solid and strong, a monument to love, patience, and the transformative power of giving someone space to heal. The story could end there, with two people who found each other and built something beautiful together. But life continued, as it always does, with more chapters yet to be written. Kieran passed away peacefully in 1928, at the age of 71. He died in his sleep on a warm summer night, Victoria beside him as she had been for their entire marriage. His last words, spoken that evening as they watched the sun set from their porch, were, "It has been a good life, my love. No regrets." Victoria mourned deeply, but not desperately. She missed him with every fiber of her being. But she also carried the certainty that their love had been real and complete, with nothing left unsaid or undone. She wore his ring on a chain around her neck and continued to run the ranch with the help of their children, remaining active and engaged despite her grief. She lived for another 12 years, watching the ranch continue to thrive, seeing more great-grandchildren born, and maintaining the gardens she had planted decades earlier. She wrote letters to all her descendants, filled with stories and wisdom, wanting them to know their history and the love that had founded their family. On a cool October morning in 1940, Victoria woke feeling strange. She was 82 years old, and her body had been failing gradually for months. She knew, with the certainty that comes at the end of a long life, that this was her last day. She called her children to her bedside, and they came quickly, gathering around her in the room she had shared with Kieran for so many years. "Do not be sad," she told them, her voice weak but clear. "I have lived a life beyond my wildest dreams. I found love when I thought I was too broken to be loved. I built a family when I thought I would always be alone. I learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it." Tommy held one hand, Ella the other. Robert stood at the foot of the bed with his sisters beside him. "Tell us again," Ella said. "Tell us how you and Papa met." Victoria smiled, her eyes going distant with memory. "I was looking for exits," she said softly, "always looking for ways to escape. And your father, he saw that about me, and instead of trying to trap me or fix me, he simply made sure I always had a clear path out. He gave me the freedom to choose, and that freedom allowed me to choose him." She looked at each of her children in turn. "That is what love should be. Not a cage, but a wide open space where both people can grow. Remember that." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Victoria felt herself slipping away. It did not hurt. It felt like falling asleep after a very long, very full day. Her last thought was of Kieran, and she could have sworn she felt his hand reach for hers, steady and warm. "Come on, Victoria," she heard his voice say, as clear as if he were standing beside her. "I have been waiting. Let me show you what comes next." And she took his hand and followed him, just as she had followed him into a new life all those years ago in Seligman, Arizona. The Triple Q Ranch continued to thrive under the management of Tommy and his siblings, passing through generations as a testament to the love and work of Kieran and Victoria Quinn. The story of the cowboy who never blocked an exit and the woman who learned to stop running became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren, a reminder that true love is patient, that healing takes time, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is choose to stay. In the cemetery in Seligman, 2 headstones stand side by side under a cottonwood tree. The inscriptions are simple: Kieran Thomas Quinn, 1857-1928, beloved husband, father, and friend. Victoria Rose Quinn, 1858-1940, beloved wife, mother, and friend. But those who knew their story understood the deeper truth carved in those stones. Here lie 2 people who found each other when they needed it most, who built a life of love and respect and partnership, who proved that even the deepest wounds can heal given time and tenderness. And on warm evenings when the wind blows through Seligman, some say you can still see them. 2 figures dancing on the porch of the old ranch house, their love eternal as the desert stars, their story a beacon for anyone who has ever been afraid and learned to be brave, anyone who has ever been broken and learned to be whole, anyone who has ever needed space to breathe and found someone wise enough to give it.